This drink may be destroying your mental health, your mood, and ultimately your brain. Hey Wellness Warrior, I'm Dr. Zyrowski, and the drink that we're talking about today is going to be energy drinks. We see so much information about this in the news today. Are they good? Are they bad? The one thing I can tell you, whether you believe they're good or bad at this point, is that an enormous amount of people consume them every single day. So we're going to talk about the implications of caffeine, some of the positive, but a lot of the negative as well. And the reason I want to focus on some of the negative is because nobody knows about it. Nobody's ever told you that it exists. Let me be clear, this isn't an anti-caffeine video. However, you need to know what comes as a package when you start consuming caffeine, because we all know that when we first get that big boost of caffeine, we like the way that it helps our brain feel and how it makes us feel physically, right? We feel very physically capable and our brain feels very cognitively sharp. So let's look at the caffeine aspect of this first. The average energy drink has 1 to 200 milligrams of caffeine in it. That is a massive jolt of caffeine. And we're going to talk about the side effects in a second, but let's also talk about what else you might find in these energy drinks. Well, first of all, an enormous dose of sugar in many of them. And you may say to yourself, well, you know what? I get the ones without the sugar. So therefore, you're using something like sucralose, which has been shown to be genotoxic. So if you're using the sugar, we know that this can lead to insulin resistance, and over time, it can have a very degenerative impact on your brain health, leading to things like Alzheimer's. These are both bad. And then if that's not bad enough, a lot of these energy drinks are going to have a lot of dyes in them and other really bad, harmful ingredients that are linked to things like ADHD. Here's the thing. I know that there's always cleaner energy drinks out there, and I hope you're looking for them, but I want to point out some of these major issues. When we look at caffeine and drinking this massive amount all at once, what are some of the things that can actually happen to your body and your brain? Well, first of all, it can lead to anxiety and a massive amount of anxiety. And this is because of how the caffeine actually interacts with the brain, with the catecholamines, the neurotransmitters, and the impact it can have day after day of consuming these massive amounts of caffeine. So if you drink caffeine, be careful with this, because if you're also somebody who suffers from anxiety, there's a good chance that they're related. Now, also the stress response. When you consume caffeine, it can release a huge dose of cortisol to the body, and this can lead to adrenal exhaustion. We have to remember that caffeine is a false energy to the body. So therefore, it could be a long day. You're tired, you're worn out, and what do? Well, you say, you know what? I have no energy. Let me turn to some caffeine, right? We all do this from time to time, some of us regularly. And so you turn to caffeine, all of a sudden, boom, back in action. Brain's fired up, body's fired up, but that's a false energy because your body isn't capable of making that energy. You're actually throwing a stimulant in, okay? So over time, this can lead to a massive amount of adrenal exhaustion. So ultimately what this leads to is further stress on the body because we're using a false energy. Now let's talk about sleep, okay? Because what happens with this caffeine is it actually can mess with our sleep-wake cycle in the way that it interacts with cortisol, but also if we're not metabolizing it fast enough, which we're going to talk about genetic variations, which you may have, that would cause a lot of these negative symptoms with caffeine in your body. So sleep. It can affect your sleep, keeping you up, keeping your brain active. So you can have this idea like, hey, I got 8 hours of sleep because I was in bed for 8 hours. Yet you weren't falling into a deep sleep because of the amount of caffeine you consume throughout the day. So we got to be careful with that. It leads to headaches because caffeine is addictive. You're taking all this caffeine and then all of a sudden you forget one day to have that energy drink, to have those 6 cups of coffee, right? Because it's not only energy drinks. Obviously, caffeine's heavily found in coffee. And if you're overdoing it, you can start to have some big issues with headaches and then not even know it because you're like, well, I didn't realize I didn't hit my caffeine quota today. And now your body's saying, well, you didn't. So now here's a massive headache. So deal with this. Now, the other thing that you'll deal with is a lot of mood swings because highs and lows come with the caffeine. Dehydration is another big problem. Well, why is this? Simply because what happens is caffeine is going to act as a diuretic, meaning that you're going to flush a lot of the different minerals and electrolytes out of your body along with the water. So consuming coffee in excess amounts or energy drinks it is going to act as a diuretic, dehydrate you, which can lead to these headaches, but also lead to a lot of muscle twitching, and you may find it hard to actually rehydrate properly throughout the day if you're overdoing caffeine. Now, heart health is a big one, and I think that this one's probably one of the scariest things because this happens to a lot of young people who are overusing caffeine. The excess amount of caffeine is going to lead to heart palpitations. I remember many years ago when I was in college, there was a classmate that ended up going to the hospital for heart palpitations, and what they basically came to the conclusion of is you are consuming way too much caffeine. He cut the caffeine out and the heart palpitations went away. So it can lead to heart palpitations and arrhythmias. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how you may have some genetic variances that's causing this and then what to do about it. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Just like you want pure water, you also want clean surfaces and air in your environment, free of pathogens that can harm you and cause you to become sick. And this is where Iceman germicidal UVC light really shines. For years, UVC has been used to disinfect drinking water, air, surfaces, and high traffic areas against a whole suite of pathogens. In fact, UVC light has rendered inactive all bacteria and viruses tested to date, including the virus we dare not to mention. Iceman UVC Sanitizer is a smart UVC light that is easily controlled by an app, allowing you to run your sanitization on schedule, keeping your space disinfected and clean. This environmentally friendly cleaning unit has a cool feature that detects motion, so it'll automatically stop when a person or pet enters the room. This creates a safe space for everyone. To get your Iceman UVC light, you can click on the link below and our viewers will receive a special discount. Stop using harsh chemicals and switch to Iceman's UVC light in order to create a germ-free environment today. Now, the genetic variances that we have to watch out for are these two. And you might say, well, how in the world would I know that if I'm having a genetic variance that makes me more sensitive to caffeine? Well, you would have to get a genetic test done and it would tell you this information. But I think it's important for you to know that this exists because some people may say, well, everybody around me drinks caffeine and they're fine, so it should be fine for me. No, not necessarily. Genetically, we're all different. So there's two genes that make us metabolize caffeine very slowly and differently. And also, when you have these genetic variances, these symptoms right here are more likely to occur in your body. So there's a CYP1A2 and the ADOR2A genetic variants. And this makes you a slow metabolizer of caffeine and not able to handle caffeine well. And all of these different symptoms, if you have this, are going to be amplified majorly. And this is the scenario where somebody's like, man, I have such bad anxiety and I need to get on some anti-anxiety pill or something like that. Well, no, it could be the caffeine driving it. Or maybe you're like, my sleep is so bad, I can't get it under control. My life is falling apart. My health is falling apart because my sleep is so bad. It could be due to this. So if you're somebody who's hypersensitive to caffeine, it doesn't mean that you could never use it. It just means that you should not consume more than 40 milligrams of caffeine per day. Whether it's a cup of coffee, some green tea, you really don't want to be over consuming it all. And when it comes to energy drinks, 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine is going to wreck your day. So make sure you're staying away from energy drinks in general. And like I said, energy drinks are all over in the news today. We have to make sure that we understand, the implications it can have on our health and how it can be negatively causing a lot of symptoms that we don't want to deal with. I'm Dr. Nick Zyrowski, and if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll like this one right over here next.